Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Y&R Trends. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Ashley Abbott's sudden return to Genoa City sent shockwaves through the Abbott family, the Newmans, and every corner of the business and personal rivalries that had been simmering beneath the surface of the city's power struggles. And for Jack Abbott, her reappearance felt less like a heartfelt homecoming and more like the beginning of a new war disguised behind a forced smile. Especially because from the moment she walked through the front doors of the Abbott mansion, she acted as if nothing had happened, as if her disappearance had not left the family confused and concerned, and as if her cold exit from Paris had been nothing more than a brief holiday instead of a calculated absence that now seemed timed to perfection. Jack watched her closely, and while Tracy immediately welcomed Ashley back with warmth, relief, and protective kindness, Jack's eyes narrowed, because he knew his sister better than most people ever could. And even in her calmest voice, he had always been able to hear the gears of her strategy shifting beneath her words. Before anyone else realized it, Jack understood that Ashley had not returned for family, for healing, or for a simple change of scenery. She had come back with purpose, motive, and a secret agenda that not even the other Abbotts had been granted access to, and that fact alone made the hairs on the back of Jack's neck stand up. He remembered the last time Ashley had kept something from him, when she orchestrated the scheme to rewrite company inheritance clauses, seizing control of Jabot with legal maneuvers that blindsided the family, and the memory of that betrayal had never quite faded. So when he saw her pick up her phone and step aside for a private conversation the moment Victor Newman's name was mentioned, Jack could already feel the storm forming, because if there was one thing that never ended well in Genoa City, it was a secret alliance between an Abbott and a Newman, especially one involving Victor, the man who had spent decades waging psychological, corporate, and personal warfare against the Abbott family. Victor's involvement in anything meant conflict, and conflict with Ashley meant Jack would be forced to defend the family all over again. Meanwhile, Ashley carried herself with composed confidence, dressed impeccably, speaking in measured tones, and presenting herself as someone whose only interest was in reconnecting with family, yet every move she made smelled like strategy, like someone who had come to play chess when everyone else still thought they were eating dinner. And the more Jack watched, the more unsettled he became. Victor Newman, after all, was facing fresh challenges, weakened by recent family divisions, and Ashley's return just happened to occur at the very moment Victor was preparing to regain control of his empire and punish those he believed were working against him. For Jack, that coincidence was too perfect to be accidental. Worse still, Ashley seemed to know things she shouldn't know. Private details about shifting corporate alliances, inside rumors at Jabot and Newman Enterprises, and potential acquisitions that should not have reached her ears unless someone had been feeding her information. And the only logical source in Jack's mind was Victor. It would not be the first time Victor had used Ashley as a weapon against the Abbotts, manipulating her weaknesses, pride, and emotions to fracture the family. And even though Ashley had matured beyond many of her impulsive past mistakes, Jack could sense she was on the edge again, teetering between brilliant decisive leadership and reckless personal crusade. Ashley insisted she had only returned to protect what is ours, a vague statement that Jack dissected from every angle, because protection in business could mean anything: protecting the family legacy, protecting the Jabot brand, protecting her own influence, or worse, ensuring that another Abbott, perhaps Jack himself, was removed from power. She always spoke with logic, but she also operated through emotion. And Jack felt she was holding onto a fire that she had not yet explained. Quietly, he began digging into what she had been doing before she returned, calling contacts overseas, reaching out to Jabot allies in Europe, and even connecting with people close to Tucker McCall, trying to determine whether Ashley had been working with or against him. What Jack found was deeply unsettling: rumors, whispers, business inquiries that connected Ashley to key Newman expansion projects, ventures that should have been competitive with Jabot, not aligned with it. And although none of the leads were solid enough to confirm a partnership, the implication alone was enough to raise his suspicions to the highest level. And while Jack was hunting her motives, Ashley was just as quietly making moves of her own, reaching out to board members, checking in with R&D, re-establishing relationships inside the company walls, not as someone easing her way back into the corporate environment, but like someone assessing which pieces were in position for a takeover. She had always loved Jabot, fought for it, bled for it, but love for the company had also made her ruthless in the past, willing to steal leadership from Jack when she believed she could run things better than he could. And this time Jack sensed that same ambition in her eyes, sharpened even further by her absence. But what worried him most was that Ashley seemed emotionally divided, sometimes calm, sometimes flickering with stress, hesitating as if fighting an internal voice she did not want to acknowledge, and there were moments when she looked as though someone else's influence was whispering in her ear, pushing her, manipulating her, convincing her that what she was doing was the correct path. And if that voice belonged to Victor Newman, then the Abbotts were in more danger than they knew. Jack decided he needed proof, not instinct, so he began tracking Ashley's movements, watching her slip out of the Abbott home for late-night meetings, taking private calls in hushed tones, and even disappearing for unexplained hours during the day without leaving any digital footprint behind. One evening, Jack followed her, staying far enough behind not to be noticed, and what he saw made his stomach twist. Ashley entering the Newman building after hours, using a private service entrance that only invited contacts of Victor would ever use, and while Jack did not know what was said inside, he did not need a transcript to know that nothing good ever came from a secret meeting between Ashley and Victor. When she returned home later that night with a faint smile and an energized calm, Jack understood that she had begun executing whatever plan she and Victor had aligned on. And now the clock was ticking for Jack to figure out what the two titans were plotting. Meanwhile, Victor believed he had regained the upper hand, confident that using Ashley against Jack would create fractures inside the Abbott family that he could exploit. And he spoke about Ashley in private meetings as if she were a strategic piece on a board rather than a person. While Victor valued her brilliance, he also understood that she carried vulnerabilities, family trauma, lifelong competition with Jack, and her own desire to leave behind a legacy that proved she was equal to or greater than the men in her life. And Victor had always known how to push psychological buttons better than anyone. Gradually, rumors began circulating across the local business community that Jabot leadership might be shifting again, that the Abbott siblings were divided, and that Ashley was quietly rallying support for a major move that could restructure the company's chain of command, and board members began receiving phone calls, private invitations, and business inquiries that felt like the early stages of a leadership campaign. Jack confronted Ashley directly for the first time during a tense evening at the Abbott mansion, demanding she reveal what she was planning and whether Victor was involved, but Ashley deflected with evasive answers, claiming Jack was paranoid and that she had returned only to stabilize the company, not destabilize it. The more Jack pushed, the more defensive Ashley became, and at one point her composure cracked, revealing a flash of anger not at Jack, but at something deeper, something that suggested she believed she was the one trying to save the company from disaster and that Jack, not she, was the one being blind to the bigger threat. This rattled Jack because Ashley was not lying. She believed what she was saying, which meant Victor had convinced her that Jack himself was the problem. Now Jack not only had to uncover Victor's plan, but had to find a way to reach his sister before the damage between them became irreversible. Meanwhile, Victor was already beginning phase 2 of his scheme. Selective leaks to the press, targeted whispers across the investment community, and strategic business moves that made Jabot appear vulnerable, overextended, and mismanaged under Jack. Ashley, unaware that Victor's tactics were designed to weaken Jabot, so she would feel even more pressure to save it, began doubling down, pushing herself deeper into strategic planning, convinced she was protecting the company from disaster. She worked late nights, rarely slept, and began showing signs of emotional strain, but to her, that stress was proof she was fighting the good fight. It wasn't long before Tracy noticed the tension in the house and confronted Jack, urging him to talk to Ashley with compassion rather than suspicion, unaware that the situation had escalated far beyond emotional misunderstandings. Jack wanted to protect his sister, but he also knew that compassion alone would not stop Victor Newman. Over the next week, a quiet business war began, with Jabot stock reacting to outside pressures that seemed artificial, rumors swirling that a major leadership shift was coming, and Victor planting seeds across the corporate landscape, while Ashley unknowingly helped him by echoing concerns to board members that she thought came from objective market pressure. Jack realized he had to expose Victor before the board made permanent decisions they could not reverse, so he pulled strings of his own, arranging a surprise appearance at a private business meeting he was not expected to attend, and when he walked in and saw Ashley sitting beside Victor at the conference table, his fears were confirmed. Ashley looked caught, defensive, cornered, and yet still certain she was doing the right thing, while Victor, with his trademark smirk, leaned back as if to silently declare to Jack that once again he had outplayed him. But this time Jack would not let the situation escalate into another family civil war. and he declared in front of everyone in that room that Victor was manipulating Ashley, exploiting her emotional vulnerabilities, and using her desire to protect the company as a weapon to destroy it. Ashley was shaken, torn between Jack's accusations and what she believed she knew, and for the first time, she hesitated in Victor's presence, realizing she did not actually understand the full scope of Victor's intentions. The meeting ended in silence, but in that silence Ashley began to understand that she might have been walking into another Newman trap disguised as partnership. When she confronted Victor privately, his evasive non-answers told her everything she needed to know. He had been playing both sides and she had been the perfect pawn. Confronted with betrayal from someone she believed was working with her in good faith, Ashley left shaken, uncertain of how to undo the damage already done, and Jack, waiting for her outside, offered his hand, not in anger but as a brother. The two walked out together, not yet healed, but beginning the slow process of rediscovering the bond Victor had tried to fracture. But the battle was far from over because Victor Newman, having been exposed, was already preparing his next move, and Ashley's sudden return had only been the beginning of a much bigger corporate war waiting just beyond the horizon, and now Jack had to prepare for the fight of his life, not just to protect Jabot, but to protect his sister from the psychological warfare of Genoa City's most dangerous opponent. What Jack didn't know, however, was that Ashley was still reeling from emotional instability left over from her time away, and while she had grown stronger and more composed on the outside, inside she was still dealing with deep-rooted psychological fault lines, and Victor Newman had known that from the moment he initiated contact. For months before Ashley's return, Victor had been carefully gathering pieces of information, feeding subtle hints and strategic observations into conversations with contacts who he knew would eventually deliver those messages back to Ashley, planting the idea that Jabot might be vulnerable, that Jack was losing grip on the company, that outsiders were preparing to seize business opportunities, while the Abbott siblings were distracted with personal drama. Ashley, already struggling with her own internal conflicts and haunted memories from past breakdowns, was in a fragile position when she received those rumors, and she convinced herself that she needed to return home to face the challenge before the Abbott family lost everything they had spent generations building. When Victor reached out to her directly during her time in Paris, he didn't openly manipulate her, at least not at first. He offered sympathy, understanding, and validation at a time when Ashley desperately needed someone to listen without judging her or treating her as unstable. Over long late-night phone calls, Victor assured her she was not weak, not damaged, and not a failure. He painted a picture of her as the hero who could step in and save the Abbott legacy from slipping between the cracks while Jack focused on the emotional fallout in his own life. In truth, Victor structured every word to appear supportive while subtly turning Ashley's perception against Jack, painting him as someone who was letting personal feelings overshadow corporate responsibility. Ashley tried to resist his voice, but she had always been susceptible to Victor, not romantically anymore but psychologically, because in her mind Victor was the only man who treated her as intellectually equal, someone capable of conquering the business world without needing to apologize for her strength. Jack loved her, but he always tried to protect her, shelter her, or soften her decisions. Victor challenged her, fueled her, and told her she had always been destined to lead. And so Ashley began to believe that Victor wasn't manipulating. He was giving her clarity, pushing her toward a destiny she had abandoned. That made Jack's accusations sting even deeper, because when Ashley looked into the mirror, she didn't see a woman being controlled. She saw a woman taking control. After the confrontation in the private business meeting where Jack exposed Victor's manipulations, Ashley felt humiliated and shaken, but she still couldn't fully process whether Jack had uncovered something real, or whether he was projecting his paranoia based on decades of corporate warfare. Victor had spent years earning his reputation as the mastermind of manipulation, and Ashley refused to believe she had fallen prey again. She went home that night and locked herself in her room at the Abbott mansion, refusing to talk to Tracy, refusing Jack's gentle knocks at her door, refusing Billy's attempt to lighten the mood, because she needed to be alone with her thoughts. Her mind kept replaying Victor's expressions during the meeting, not defensive, not sorrowful, but calculating, almost bored, as if the emotional fallout surrounding Ashley had been anticipated, even planned. That moment was the first time Ashley realized that while she had been planning business moves, Victor might have been playing something larger, psychological chess, positioning her as the wedge that would further splinter the Abbott family, weaken their emotional unity, and allow Newman Enterprises to make a calculated corporate strike while the Abbotts were blinded by internal conflict. Ashley closed her eyes and felt a sharp sting behind them, a painful reminder of the mental cracks that sometimes appeared when she pushed herself too hard. She whispered to herself that she was in control, that she had chosen her path, that she was not being used, but her heartbeat told her she was lying. Meanwhile, Victor was in his office that same night, pouring a glass of bourbon, standing in front of his window overlooking Genoa City with a quiet smirk, because even though Jack had disrupted the meeting, Victor still felt he had the upper hand. Ashley walked into my plan on her own, he told himself, and whether she stays or walks away now, the damage has already begun. But Victor underestimated something he rarely accounted for: the resilience of the Abbott siblings when united against a common enemy. Jack refused to let the situation escalate without fully understanding the psychological state of his sister. He knew Ashley's breakdown in Paris had not been mild. He had read between the lines of vague medical reports, noticed inconsistencies in communications, and while the family had respected Ashley's privacy, Jack had sensed that her return was not simply a fresh start. It was a reset after something deeply traumatic. So he quietly enlisted help, not from doctors because he knew Ashley would feel betrayed, but from someone she trusted, Tracy. Tracy was the heart of the Abbott family, the mediator, the emotional diplomat, the one person who could approach Ashley without triggering her defenses. Jack sat Tracy down and explained everything. Victor's manipulation, the secret meetings, the rumors swirling in the business community, Ashley's emotional instability, and Tracy listened with widening eyes, pain consuming her expression because she had already sensed something was wrong but never imagined Victor Newman would dare prey on Ashley's vulnerability again. Tracy agreed to talk to Ashley, but she warned Jack not to push, not to confront, not to corner, because emotional pressure on Ashley could cause fissures, and once those fissures widened, she might retreat even further into isolation or worse, back into Victor's psychological reach. So the next morning, Ashley came downstairs to find Tracy sitting at the breakfast table with 2 cups of tea waiting. No pressure, no confrontation, just warmth. Ashley sat reluctantly, tension stiffening her shoulders, prepared for judgment or criticism, but instead Tracy simply rested her hand on her sister's and spoke softly. "You've been carrying too much alone." That one sentence nearly broke Ashley. For a brief moment her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away, refusing to crack. She insisted she was fine, that she was in control, that Jack was overreacting. But Tracy didn't debate. She just listened, nodding, letting Ashley talk without interruption. And Ashley finally did talk. She admitted she had been worried about Jabot, worried that the company was slipping while the family was distracted, worried that Jack was too emotionally overwhelmed to see the threats forming around them. And then she said something that made Tracy's chest tighten. "Victor believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." Tracy felt her stomach sink, because that sentence alone revealed how deeply Victor's psychological influence had penetrated. Ashley continued, "Victor didn't tell me what to do. He showed me that I could still fight, that I still mattered, that I wasn't broken." Tracy understood the emotional importance of that, but she also understood the danger, because Victor had framed himself as Ashley's savior at the exact moment she was emotionally fractured, meaning she had tied her sense of stability to his validation. That was how control began, not through business manipulation but emotional anchoring. Tracy chose her words carefully. She reminded Ashley of every time Victor had used her, played her against Jack, manipulated her into emotional breakdowns, convinced her she was inferior, dismissed her, betrayed her, broke her. She reminded her that Victor validated her intelligence when it served him, and crushed her spirit when she defied him. She reminded Ashley of something critical. Victor Newman supported strong women until they became inconvenient. Ashley listened, but her expression hardened, because emotional dependency doesn't dissolve in a single conversation, and Tracy knew it. Later that day, Ashley went to Jabot alone, walking down the hallways with the same confident stride she had always worn, but her mind was spinning. Employees smiled, board members nodded respectfully, but Ashley couldn't shake the feeling that whispers followed her. Had the board already heard rumors? Did the staff suspect she was about to take over? Or worse, did they think Jack was failing? She locked herself in her office and stared at her reflection in the darkened glass, strong, poised, but fractured beneath the surface. Suddenly her phone buzzed. Victor again. She hesitated this time before answering, a hesitation she had never felt before, not because she feared Victor, but because Jack's words had finally begun to penetrate. Victor's voice, smooth and commanding, filled the phone. "I trust you've recovered from the theatrics yesterday," he began without preamble. Ashley bristled.